Welcome to the Learning to Choose podcast, a new podcast created to discuss the stories behind pivotal choices, learning lessons, and takeaways from interesting individuals coming from various backgrounds and walks of life. I'm your host, Evan Snow, an arts advocate, community builder, creative entrepreneur, and most recently, the author of Learning to Choose. For more information, you can log on to learningtochoose.com. My guest today is Joel Gandara, our upcoming AAF Creatives End speaker. Joel is an entrepreneur, an author, a father, an investor, and a life and business coach, amongst many other things. Joel, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us on this first episode of the Learning to Choose podcast and making the time to share your story on the preview here, as well as next week with Creative Zen, which we'll get to. But for those that are not familiar with you, with your work, with your journey, with your story, why don't you give us a little bit of a high level overview around how you learned to choose and got to this point in life?
Sure. First off, thanks. I'm excited to be here. I'm honored that I am the first guest. Yeah, I've had to make a lot of choices in my life because nothing came easy. For starters, I was born in Cuba, and that was not great. And I wouldn't change anything, but my parents had to make a choice early on, and there was an opportunity to leave uh, in 1980. I was a kid, and I remember it. I was a young kid. I was 4.5 years old, but we came on a boat. We didn't just jump on a plane and left. This was, a little traumatic for a kid. It was 12 hours on a very crowded little boat with 150 people on it, and we had no business having that many people on there. There definitely weren't enough life jackets. We never even saw life jackets. And 4 of those hours was a really rough storm. So that's what's recorded itself in my head. Those were the first choices that had to be made, and they were made by my parents, fortunately. Years later, I found out that from them that they thought we were going to die in the ocean. I didn't know that because I didn't know what death was really at that age. But we've been interviewed on Telemundo, my family, myself, like an actual segment that was put together, and that's the first time I learned this 3 years ago on the 40th anniversary of coming over here. I heard my mom in the interview saying, I was praying and asking for forgiveness because here I brought my two boys to come die in the middle of the ocean. So it's pretty strong.
Uh, um, Amazing. I appreciate those that come to this country to pursue their American dream. Give obviously a lot of kudos and credit to your parents, and never could have imagined that that would pave the way for this life that you've worked very hard to create for yourself. So you've had a lot of success on the business side, and success comes with a lot of hard work. Could you just tell us maybe some of those initial choices that you made in some of the early phases of your entrepreneurship and getting into business, and what that looked like way back when?
Yeah, and I can go way back because my entrepreneurial journey, it's not just like a cute story. It literally was in fourth grade out of necessity because other kids had snacks that I wanted to have, and other kids had toys that I wanted to have. And my parents would give me either the leftovers from last night or they'd make me a sandwich, a yogurt, a banana, and that was it. And I saw kids having all these fun snacks. And then after school, some of the kids would go, this is back in the days, and you could leave elementary school and walk across the street after school and go get a donut and stuff. Now you can't, you're like guarded in there. But so in fourth grade, I wanted to have a piece of that American dream. And I started buying collector cards, very inexpensive. And I would sell them for more money at the schoolyard, at recess, before school, lunch, after school, all of that. And I started making money. And in fourth grade, I was about 10 years old. I made maybe $40 or $50. It was enough in profit. It was enough that I bought myself a transformer, this toy robot that was really expensive. And it was the largest transformer at the time. It was called Omega Supreme. It was this big base. I couldn't believe that I was able to do that because here I was, this kid whose parents couldn't buy those things. Then I kept making money and I could go to the donut shop across the street from school after school, and that I felt like the man. Like I am just the guy. I've got my own money. And then that evolved into, in high school, I always had a part-time job. but I started selling chocolates. I'd go to Costco and I'd buy boxes. I had a friend who had a membership, their family did. So we'd go there and we'd buy a bunch of boxes, just me, but my friend would go with me and I'd buy them all. I remember the bars back then, this mid 90s, the bars were 24 cents each, and I would sell them two for $1 at school. So I was doubling my money. And the vending machines at my school were 60 cents. So it actually caused the problem where they started making announcements in my school saying someone is selling chocolate apparently because our vending machines sales have dropped. And I remember feeling honored that I hit such a mark that it made an impact on the vending machine sales. But I had a better deal. I brought it to you in the classroom or the hallway, wherever you could catch me. And mine were two for $1, 50 cents. And I was making $30 a day in profit during high school during that time. And from there, it's been a series of choices. I jumped way to the old days, but I've had to make choices in business for many, many years. I'm happy to dive into those if that any of this has
Yeah,
piqued any
yeah.
interest.
No, that was great. The thought that comes to mind, and we're from a previous generation, and in that previous generation, especially in those school days, entrepreneurship was really not preached as much as go this straight narrow path of go to school, go to college, get your job, try to climb the corporate ladder and all those things. But I, as an entrepreneur myself, and as somebody that studies and research entrepreneurship and finds a lot of inspiration from people like yourself or Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V, I find a lot of takeaways, a lot of inspiration, and a lot of respect for people that didn't go that straight and narrow path, that kind of did carve their own way. So I do appreciate you saying that because I'm not a parent. I know you're a father, and we'll get to that. But I know people that have kids, it can be challenging, and sometimes the kids might get in trouble in school. They might not seem to be going that straight and narrow path that the guidance counselor would like. But I love sharing these stories to kind of remind people that there is a brighter path, there is another way, as it's entrepreneurship has worked out for yourself, and myself as well. So from those early entrepreneurial journeys and side hustles and passion projects, how did you then evolve to becoming a business owner, entrepreneur, and in the business world?
Yeah, so you're right what you said about entrepreneurship not being a thing. Like I remember like around 1990 or maybe it was late 80s, I heard the word entrepreneur for the first time. And then it went years before I heard it again. That wasn't like today. Today everybody's an entrepreneur. It's everywhere. And yeah, school. So to touch on the school thing, I was not a good student. I got C's in school and I felt very dumb. In the beginning, I had to be held back one year. They started me a little too early in kindergarten. I had just gotten here 3 months before. I was not even 5 years old. And they dropped me in kindergarten. I was lost. I didn't speak the language for a couple of years. And I always felt dumb. I always felt out of place and I never knew what was being said or what was that. It was always a confusion. I remember my first few years in this country, just a blur of confusion. And so I always felt different. I felt a little dumb and I had to do things differently because I wasn't doing good in school. I was I'm not going to say a laughing stock or anything, but I just didn't fit in with school. With people I did, because by the way, third grade, one of the most honorable things I have is a yearbook that shows that I was voted friendliest among my peers for the elementary. And I'm honored that I got that because I didn't do well in school, but I was a cool guy to hang out with at lunch and recess. And every time I found someone new or sitting by themselves, I go, hey, come over here, come play with us. And I push my kids a lot to do that. So you mentioned Gary V. Here's another coincidence with Gary V. When I was in high school, I would start going to garage sales and look for things that I could buy for cheap. There was no internet, so I couldn't flip them like that. But I'd go to the flea market when I had enough stuff. And one day I found a guy selling jockey underwear. He was a sales rep, and these were his leftover samples. He was an independent sales rep. He showed me receipts eventually. He showed me, look, I buy all this stuff. It's all legit. I sell to Macy's. I sell to JCPenney, get big multi-million dollar orders. But then I got thousands of extra pieces that I don't need anymore because the trade shows are done and I don't need these old pieces. So he would sell them to me for $1. I'd go to the flea market and sell them for like $6, but these were $12 to $14 underwear, brand new in the package. And so I did that, and that went extremely well. I remember taking my $500 purchase first time I met the guy, and he's like, he said to me, "This is great. Let's keep doing this. I'll call you every 6 months because I don't like doing these garage sales in front of my house." And oh, by the way, he said to me, "I have a son about your age and he's so lazy. I've offered to give him all this for free. He could do the garage sales or he could do the flea markets and he can make all this money for free, but he's inside playing video games." Here I was, 19 years old, hungry, in a crappy car and just wanting to get ahead in life and get out of the ghetto I grew up in right outside of Oakland, California. And I said, "Oh, I'll buy them. I'll always, please call me." And he did. For 11 years, this guy called me and he'd say, "Joel, I've got another 2,400 pieces, 2,000 pieces, whatever it was." And he always sold them to me for $1. But over a couple of visits to the flea market, eBay came around and the internet got popular. So I started selling on eBay. And now I wasn't getting $6, I was getting $10. And I was getting these for $1. The problem is I could only get 1,000 pieces, 1,200, whatever he had, 2,400 at most, but I always ran out. And my job at the time was $8 an hour full time, right out of high school. And I was realizing if I could get a guy like him, more of these guys, I could have a business and I could quit my stupid job for $8 an hour. And never, it took years to find someone like him, but I found a brand out of Mexico. I was searching on the internet hours a day. I knew one day I'd find something. And I found a brand that was not really in the US. I talked to them. They had 2,400 a year in sales roughly in the US. That's it. They weren't big here. And I placed a $2,400 order to start. And then a week later, I called them. I placed another 2,400, and that's when the guy said, You're not going to believe this, but you've just doubled my U.S. sales from last year." And I said, "Great. Can I be the only guy you sell to?" And he said, "Yeah, I'll stop selling to those guys. They don't really buy much anyway." And we started growing it. I started taking it to Las Vegas for trade shows. I went to New York, Miami, and I would sell. And I got it into stores. And then I started really growing that. I got to where I was buying over $1 million a year from that company. We worked together for 9 years. Now, all of this sounds amazing. All of this sounds like, wow, look, grew up in poverty, came here on a boat, multi-millions in sales, all this going great, right? Well, one of the worst things that could have ever happened to me at the peak. When things were going phenomenally well, I was selling a few $1 million a year. I was making real money. I couldn't believe it. I was making in a year what up to that point my parents had already taken 30 years to make. So it was pretty impressive. It was amazing. And then what happened? That brand that I was so enamored with, not just so much the brand, but the man who owned it. To me, he was my second dad. There's a book by Robert Kiyosaki, the real estate book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I had a poor dad,
Hmm.
and this guy was my rich dad. Coincidentally, they were both named Jose, both guys, my dad and the other guy. And I always thought that this is my rich dad. I get all my good financial advice, good life advice from him when it comes to getting ahead and doing well and thinking positively. And then his son, who I'd never met, found out that I was doing really, really well. And after years of always telling his dad, "I don't really want to be in the business with you," he saw that I was doing well and he wanted to jump in. And over a little bit of time, he started contacting all the stores that I was selling to and offered them, "Hey, if you want to work directly, if you want to call me, if you want to order from me." And I saw the writing on the wall and I knew I was in big trouble because the dad backed up his son. Blood's thicker than water. And it was the saddest moment of my life. I felt betrayed, cheated. And then more than that, I was really worried. I go, this is all that I have. And I haven't lived above my means at all. I've kept it simple. But man, I'm going to go to zero income pretty soon. And that scared the heck out of me. There, I had to make some drastic life decisions after that.
Well, and I appreciate you mentioning that because a lot of people, they see a success story and they think it's all peaches and rainbows and they think the streets paved with glitters and gold, and in all reality it's not. And a lot of times, we have to make pivots and pivotal life choices. So if you would, be so kind to share, now that I'm at the edge of my seat, what was that pivot like then after the son made that choice to, you know, take an interest in the business.
Yeah, well, the streets were no longer lined in gold and rainbows and none of that. The streets were now lined in feces for me because I saw it really, really bad. I don't think I cried, but I remember laying in bed just like stuck. I couldn't even get up. My wife, we had two kids at the time. Now we have four. This is years ago, and they were little babies, and now they're grown men. But my wife came into the room and said, "Hey, let's go. We're going to the neighbor's barbecue." And she knew what happened. And I said, "I can't. I just got to lay here." I probably was I imagined myself, from what I remember, face up, no pillow, staring at the ceiling, just numb. I didn't know what to do. And she said, "Come on, come with me. You'll feel better. Let's go to the neighbors." And she went without me because I told her. She kept insisting. I said, "No, I don't want to go. I don't feel well." And she came back and she goes, "Hey, the neighbor says, come over. He wants to talk to you. He's older than me. He's 11 years older, a lot more success than me. And and he wanted to talk to me." And I go, "Fine, I'll go." And I dragged myself 2 doors down to his house. And we didn't go to the backyard and barbecue with the rest of the family. We went in his office. And this was my first like real mentoring event. He said, "All right, tell me what happened." "Oh no, your wife told me what happened. What are you going to do?"
Hmm.
And I said, "I don't know. I don't know what to do. This is all I got. All I own is a shell of a company. I don't own the contact information for the end consumer. I sell to stores. I don't own the brand. I buy from a brand owner in another country. So they could just go direct. They don't need me." And here I built the business. I moved it out of my garage. I have a warehouse. I have employees. I've got hundreds of thousands of dollars invested in products. I don't know what to do. And then he said, "Look, do your customers like you? All those store owners and store buyers and website owners?" And I go, "Yeah, they like me because I always under promise and I over deliver and I give them everything they need and I'm very honest with them." And so he said, "Well, why don't you start your own brand and sell it to them? They're going to buy from you." And he was so confident that I found it so like weird. What do you know if they're going to buy from me, right? Who are you to say that? I know he's a smart guy. He's a total mentor. He still till this day mentors a lot of people and coaches them. And so I started researching that path quickly because what else do I have to do? I have to figure this out. And I got in contact with a factory and I got to know them pretty well. And we came up with designs. And before I did that, I went to some very close stores of mine that, websites and people I've been selling to for years. And I told them what was going on because, by the way, a lot of those stores emailed me. That's how I found out. Within a 30-minute span, I got a bunch of emails from clients saying, "Hey, this is a little unethical. They're contacting us directly. We want to work with you." And that was a breath of fresh air that they gave me. That the store owners trust me that much to tell me and not go around my back. So this is how well it was. I got some of those stores to help me come up with designs of our product. This is underwear, swimwear, athletic apparel. And so we came up with designs and I launched it. And I took the biggest risk at that moment. I spent $80,000 and I paid for the whole order with the factory and it worked. And the products came in and then I started contacting the clients. First, I told the ones who helped me build the brand, I said, "I'll sell to you first. You can launch it on your websites and stores, and you'll be the first ones." Now, all the others, I offered it to them, and I couldn't believe the response. Maybe at the time I was selling to like 30 stores, maybe, and I got probably 28 of them to say basically these words: "All right, we'll place our first order with you. Let us know when you want us to stop buying that other brand." I couldn't believe that. I go, "What loyalty?" I guess, you know what? I kind of deserve it. I've been very good to these people. I took taking care of them. I processed their orders quickly. I shipped them their stuff. I responded to all their phone calls. When I went to trade shows, I'd invite everybody to lunch and dinner and call them and check in on them and see how everything's going. So they really treated me well, and that helped me change everything. Uh, that brand, it took about 13 months for it to retail its first $1 million from zero. It was an unknown brand. And then I would go to like grassroots events where I'd put a little table and try to push my stuff. And I couldn't believe that the day that someone saw my brand of underwear and he said, "Oh, I own some of these." And I said, "No, no, no, no. This is brand new. The brand's like 7 months old. You probably have never heard of it. It might sound like something similar." He goes, "No, no, no. I'm telling you, I own these." And I go, "Okay, where'd you buy it?" And he told me the catalog company that he was buying from. I go, "Oh, yeah, they're my biggest customer." And he goes, "You're not going to believe this." And he pushed his jeans down like 2 inches and he raised his underwear waistband. And it was my brand. And I don't know if I hugged the guy, but I was like, "Oh my God, I've made it." And yeah, it took 13 months, but the retail on that first brand was $1 million. I didn't get all that retail because I wholesaled to stores,
Sure.
but my clients were growing it. They were excited. They said, "Joel, you got to develop more brands." I did. And then See, when I first went to a trade show, it was taking that other brand from another country, and I felt overwhelmed. I remember being in Vegas in a booth that was horrible. I had one poster on the wall. I mean, I just looked like Mickey Mouse compared to all these heavy duty, heavy hitting brands. And here's the crazy part. I'll fast forward a lot of years as I just kept working hard for my clients and taking care of them and coming up with good designs and shipping to them properly and all that. I started finding opportunities to buy those competitors that were around me at those trade shows that looked like super solid, big brands, and I was the little tiny brand. I bought 14 companies and a lot of those were my direct competitors over the years. It took a little while, but I started building relationships. I went to the trade shows and they'd be my competitors all around me, but I'd go introduce myself and be friendly with them, give them my phone number, my contact, and talk to them. And I became friendly with a lot of them. And then I'd always say, after we know each other a good 6 months or so, I'd say, hey, if you ever think about selling your business, talk to me first. I'd love to talk to you about that. See if maybe I could buy it. And that's how it got developed. And I started buying other people's brands, and I really grew that way.
Jesus, that is what I love to hear. That is amazing. And, it would have been very easy, understandably, to get down. Woe is me. I just lost this opportunity. Why did the son, have to make that choice? What am I going to do next? But, fortunately, I think, if you're a good human being, if you're, authentic and genuine and, you do things for the right reasons, I'd like to believe that the universe conspires in beautiful ways to help good people like that. And I know you're a good person before I got to meet you at my Creative Zen Talk, because one of the men that I admire and respect the most in this world, Carrie Baker, told me you were a good guy. And I know you've done some work with him on a personal side, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and men's work. Aside from the business side and the entrepreneurial side, which we could talk about all day, how about maybe tell us some of the choices that you've made on the personal side, uh, self-care, mental health, personal development, exercise. You seem to be in pretty good shape. So, what are some of those choices look like, and how have they impacted, your life and growth and development?
Yeah. So right before I jump into that, I just want to touch on what you said.
Please.
I did get very down. I did get very woe is me. It didn't last long, and I want to credit that to Jeff Jordan, that mentor that I mentioned. So that's what I've learned. That was my first lesson in mentorship, and I was a mentee. Since then, right around that time, I started volunteering as a mentor to entrepreneurs, as a mentor to younger people. So I did Big Brother, Big Sister, Big Brothers when I was younger, but this was my first time like saying like that guy changed my path. I was ready to quit. I was ready to just go look for another job and go back to what I was doing before, which never made me a lot of money, never gave me much success. So I just want to mention that not only Jeff, but mentorship and helping people. I love doing it now because I needed it in that moment, and he saved my not my life. I wasn't going to kill myself, but he saved me a lot of pain that I would have been through. So, okay,
I
personal.
appreciate you mentioning. No, I appreciate you
Yeah.
mentioning that as well, because right, not everybody, realizes that, and if things would have been different, and you might have had to make another choice, and you had a family, you had kids, everybody has to feed their family one way or another. And a lot of people, there's nothing wrong with going back and working a nine
Hmm.
to five job. Somebody has to work the 9 to 5
Yeah.
job. But I'd like to think, if you have a higher calling, and if you have potential in you to do more, that's why I want to share these stories. That's why I want to talk about
Yeah.
these choices and these learning lessons, because I know that there's somebody sitting there, maybe they're not necessarily doing something that they hate, but they could be doing something more for their self, for their family, for their
Mhm.
community, or for the world. And that's why I like kind of diving into these,
Yeah.
so we can hopefully help inspire a new wave of a new generation of entrepreneurs, of
Yeah.
startup founders, of business people, but also self-care, mental
Yeah.
health, and just overall health and well-being. With myself being a type 1 diabetic is important to me, so that's why I also do want to make a point to share
Yeah.
on the personal side of things as well, because it's very easy to burn yourself out, and thankfully you've developed some habits, rituals, best practices that have helped you address your health and well-being personally. So,
Yeah.
anything that you want to share on that front, I'd
Yeah.
certainly love to hear.
Yeah. I try. I take some pride in not being one dimensional. I can talk about business when it's necessary, but I like talking
Sure.
about the self and not myself, the person, because you could be a better entrepreneur. You could be a better spouse. You could be a better parent. You could be a better son or daughter when you take care of yourself. If you don't, you're the ceiling of that results you're going to get, right? If I'm down here, I'm never going to inspire others. I'm never going to build a business. I'm never going to do anything because I'm down here. So, yes, taking care of myself for me is so important, but I didn't realize that. See, growing up, I played sports. I played baseball, soccer, some basketball. I played baseball up until my first year in college. I hurt my back and I stopped playing. But so I always took care of myself. But then what happened? Started working full time. Then I started working a full time job and a part time job. Then a full time job, a part time job, and this little eBay business on the side. So, how can you stop to take care of yourself when you just think you're supposed to just work to get out of poverty to grow? Well, what no one taught me back then is, you know what? You can take 5 minutes off every hour and do some air squats. And you get tired of the air squats, drop down and do 20 push ups. And then you could do some jumping jacks. And then, boom, 5 minutes, it's up, get back to work. That is a nice break for your brain, your body, your heart. I mean, it's phenomenal. It's just like meditating, yoga. You could do all these things throughout a day. Um, but I didn't know that. I didn't realize that. I thought, oh, you got to join a gym. And to be honest with you, even though I was working a lot, I didn't even want to spend the money on joining a gym. I'm trying to get out of poverty. I don't want to live here anymore. I heard gunshots almost every night. I saw helicopters from the police. I didn't want to be there anymore. So all I did was work. I just wish somebody would have told me, stop and exercise a little, stop and meditate. I didn't even know about yoga back then. Well, anyway, so here's some of the habits that I have now. Um, well, first of all, in my late 30s, I got myself out of the day to day of my businesses. And my dream was, what if I could take off at noon on Wednesdays, just Wednesdays? And I did that. Then I said, what if I could do that on Fridays? Hey, you know what? Wednesdays, I won't even come in anymore over time. And I started stepping out of the day to day because I saw that I had a good team and I had 11 people in the office and they knew what they were doing and they could run it very well without me. I just had to have a couple phone calls a day. So I started doing that. Well, how did I occupy my time as a type A person who wants to keep busy? I started running and I ran a 5K and that was pretty cool. And then I ran like 30 of them. And then I said, let me try a 10K and then a half marathon, ultra marathon. And I started just getting busy that way. And then I realized, when I'm running, I'm thinking a lot, but I'm not learning anything. Let me start listening to audiobooks. And then audiobooks are a little slow for me. So I sped it up to 1.6. And then I did a podcast interview years ago, and the guy's like, "You're very fast talking and fast thinking. You're probably at least at a 2 on your Audible, right?" And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm not." So today I'm proud to say I'm between 2.5 to 2.7 on my audiobooks. And I've trained my brain. I'm not trying to be goofy. I really have trained my brain to listen fast. So guess what happens when you're running ultra marathon distances and you're speeding up your audio, you're covering 3 books a week, like easy. I was knocking out 3 books and learning a lot. And I get bored when I'm running, and I get bored if they're talking slow. So if talking fast and running gets me super engaged, I'm in it. My body's working and my mind is working. So I did a lot of running. I put in a lot of miles, a lot of audiobooks. And all that time I was like, this is good. I'm developing myself. I'm learning. I'm going to conferences. I'm going to events. Anytime I got an invitation to an event, I'll say yes, just so I can meet people and learn. But I didn't have a purpose for it. It wasn't for anyone else. It was to develop myself. Little did I know, fast forward, I'd sell my businesses. I'd be retired early. And I'd had the opportunity to start mentoring on a higher level and really coaching people and building a coaching practice around it. Then I go, oh my God, all that good stuff I was doing for myself, I'm passing it on now. So this is good. So I do a lot of things like, my coaching clients book calls with me, but they can't book a call with me from Friday at 12 p.m. on. That's my own time. And I squeeze a lot of that extra throughout the week. But that's a time where, for about a year, every Friday I went to the beach and I did stretching and yoga by myself for like 30 minutes. And then I'd go to the Russian bath and do like ice water, heat,
Yes.
all that stuff. I'd go to the Russian and Turkish baths and I'd spend 3, 4 hours every Friday doing just that. Then I'd go eat dinner. Then I'd go home or have my wife come out and meet me for dinner. I get massages very regularly. When I was running, I do 1 to 3 a week. I know that sounds crazy, but when your body's going through that punishment, you need it. And then you mentioned it earlier. The thing that I have found, and I've done all kinds of exercises that I have found that's changed my life, is jujitsu. And the reason for that is, look, I love yoga. I like running. I love sports like soccer and all that. I like all that. But jujitsu is scary, and life is scary, and life has a danger in front of you, right? You can't walk off a bridge. You can't make that phone call to apologize to somebody who you owe an apology to. That's scary. Well, so is, I'm only 5'9", 175 pounds. So a 250-pound big old guy is very scary. Well, I got to face him every night, him or a combination of people like him or her, So I got to go through these moments of like, oh boy, this is going to be scary. So and this is going to be uncomfortable. I had a guy last night, 250 pounds, crushing me, and I was able to survive. And I forced myself not to tap out because he's not trying to break anything on me. He's not choking me out at this moment. He's trying to, but he's not doing it. So it's just uncomfortable. That has allowed me to cross it over into regular life. So did ultra marathon running when I was doing a lot of that, because life's uncomfortable. And if you could get through little tests in a controlled environment where at any moment you can say, I quit, I tap, 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 that's a practice. And you build that muscle of like, you know what? I'm going to have that awkward conversation. I'm going to apologize to that person. I'm going to make that phone call. So those are some of the things that I find that help me a lot. Now, as far as diet, I keep a low sugar diet. I don't know if it has a name. I don't give anything names. It's just whatever feels right and whatever works for me.
Sure.
I take good supplements that I like. I take one medication that I have to for prostate, but other than that, everything's natural. I eat pretty well. I don't eat processed foods. That's a big game changer. I don't drink soda. I actually don't drink alcohol. The only tobacco I'll ever have is a cigar twice a year, maybe, with friends, never by myself. So that's it. I leave a pretty healthy lifestyle, and I surround myself with amazing people. I can tell you that I can look through my contacts. I don't have one person that doesn't belong in my life. If you are negative, filthy person that just treats people bad, you're not in my life. I don't even know who you are. Maybe I knew you 20 years ago, but you've been dropped out. So I have a best friend as a wife for 21 years. I have 4 kids that are, every parent says this, but I think they're phenomenal. We have such peace in our house. It's so calm. There's no fighting. There's no yelling. There's a ton of laughing. So I think when you combine all these things that I'm talking about right here, it makes for a pretty happy life.
I think so. And happy wife, happy life.
Mm-hmm.
Kudos there. The Russian Turkish bath spa that you mentioned, was that the one in Miami or was that in California?
Yeah, I've been living in Miami for 20 something years now. It was it broke my heart when they closed down during COVID,
Yeah.
and they have not
Oh,
opened.
yeah. One of my favorite self-care spots to go to was part of my annual New Year's Day recovery,
Mm.
and I would go there after my annual art fair every year. Thankfully, other places, not exactly the Russian Turkish bath spa style, are popping up more with at least sauna and cold plunge, without the Schwitz room. But if you ever get an opportunity, if you're in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, to go to
Yeah,
the original Russian Turkish bath spa, highly recommended. You'll never leave there not feeling amazing.
yeah,
And I'm glad that you mentioned these tried and true practices, rituals, habits that have had a profound impact on your life, have had a profound impact on my life. I think they've had a pretty much a profound impact on anybody's life that does them, but you have to make the choice to do it. And you thankfully, I think some of these things are now becoming a little bit more, I don't want to say socially acceptable, but more commonplace with, leading podcasts like the Huberman Lab podcast talking about the benefits of heat with sauna and cold exposure with cold plunges and even cold showers. So I think by just raising the vibration and frequency of these talking points, of these conversations, of these resources that we find beneficial to our lives, I'd like to think, as people that care about others, yourself and myself included, that we're gonna, I think, maybe help, not only just help others improve their life, but even just kind of help inspire maybe like a another mental health renaissance and revolution and all these other benefits that everybody's struggling with something, even as you've just kind of alluded to as you're telling your story. The most successful people, they suffer and deal with highs and lows as well. And not everybody has the same support system. Not everybody has a wife as a best friend. Not everybody has a phone full of contacts of people that they value and respect in their life. So hopefully, some of what Joel just mentioned can prove, and I know it could prove to be beneficial for anybody listening. Um, from everything you just kind of mentioned and summarized, personally, professionally, you know, energetically, what would you say are some of the best learning lessons that you've acquired along this journey between the highs, the lows, having success, having it go to zero, finding a mentor? What are some of those takeaways and learning lessons that you like to share uh,
Yeah.
with people?
Yeah, I got right now, as you were saying them, I jotted down three things that were pretty big lessons in my life, and I did it just in the moment. So there could be probably like 20, but I'll just say these three because they're what came right away. I learned about supply and demand in free markets in fourth grade on the day that I had this one card for sale at lunchtime. We were outside on the benches, and I said, "Oh, look at this card that I have." And three of my good friends said, "Oh, I want it." And my price was like 25 cents for that card. And then I remember thinking, all three want it. What do you do? Do you pick a best friend? Like, well, I like you more, I'll sell it to you. And I seriously did not know. I was 10 years old. And I still remember standing there and the three boys right in front of me. And it just occurred to me. I said, well, it's 50 cents. I raised it from 25 cents to 50. And one boy walked away and goes, never mind, I don't want it. And two said, all right, I'll still take it. And I said, oh my God, I'm about to get a donut because a donut was like 65, 75 cents. And the friend, both of them wanted it. And I said, well, you know what? How about $1? And one friend walked off and the other one pulled $1 out of his pocket and goes, here you go. And I was floating on cloud nine the rest of the day. And I realized something. I learned a lot about business that day, and it has applied forever. Now I understand. If you've got something you're offering that people don't want, they're not going to pay you for it. And if you've got something
Hmm.
they really want and you're unique and you invented something or you've got something special, people will pay you more. So don't sell what everybody else does. And that helped me because I was in a niche market in the underwear and swimwear space. And I'm in a niche market now in my coaching practice. I don't coach everybody. I coach a select few, and I found a niche. So that has helped. Now, that's number one is I learned about supply and demand at 10 years old. At 22 years old, coming out of a bad neighborhood, poor parents, and a poor mindset too, because my dad would always say, like, if you can aspire to becoming a school teacher, you'll be rich because they make so much money. And there's nothing wrong with being a school teacher. My dad actually worked as a teacher's assistant because he didn't have the language, he didn't have a degree, and all that. So, but he thought, wow, if you could make $32,000 back then, you'll be loaded because that's like way more than I make, right? So he did teach me, my parents taught me this, especially my dad, to live a very lean life, a very simple, minimalist life. And I did that. And at 22 years old, I got out of that ghetto and I moved from the Bay Area, San Francisco area, down to Los Angeles. And I bought my first house at 22 years old. I had $32,000 saved up at 22. And by the way, I was paying rent. I was paying $400 a month rent. I paid my own car insurance. I paid all my own food. I did everything. And I still managed with a lot of jobs, none paying well, but a lot of jobs and little side businesses. I put $32,000 down and I bought a house. And I was single and I moved to LA and I rented out two of the bedrooms. And I lived in the master bedroom and master bath. That was on one side of the house. So I was completely alone. And I made sure to get roommates that worked full time and went to school at night, just like me. And so we never saw each other. We never bothered each other. It was great. And they paid my mortgage. And then a year later, I bought a second house. It was an investment property in LA. A year later, and I mean like exactly a year, these were September, I bought one in Miami and I moved out to Miami. And then I bought a fourth one in Miami. So that living very lean when all my friends were buying expensive cars and I was driving a 1980 Plymouth Sapporo stick shift, funky car, all my friends made fun of me. I saved up all my money and I've started buying some real estate and investing. So living under my means has always helped me. Until this day, I definitely do because I don't find pleasure in a lot of material things. I'd rather have time free to spend with friends, to exercise, to do cool things. And the last one has to do with friends. It's connecting. I learned this the hard way. I did not default to connecting with people when I was younger. I thought, hey, we're all busy, put your head down and just work. And I lost out on so many opportunities. I've made up for it, I think, over the last couple of decades. I've been hyper connecting with people that I like and who are positive and all that. So, yeah, those are the lessons. I learned about supply and demand for business. I learned about staying lean because why waste your money on stupid things that are material? Because then, by the way, if you don't save your money a little bit or live lean, when a rainy day comes, you're in trouble. And then lastly, connect with people.
Amen. Well put. And you know, a lot of people talk about investing in real estate. I'm wanting now and beginning the process of trying to invest in real estate. And a lot of people get like demystified because real estate's expensive, especially here in Southeast Florida. But as Joel just outlined, he came on a boat with very humble means and literally from fourth grade with toys and collectibles and cards and a transformer to garage sales and jockey underwear and buying for $1 and flipping for 6 something that would retail for 12 to the connections that he made and fortunately the business that he was able to create. It really is possible. And I also like the fact that you mentioned living within your means because it's easy, or it's easier to not live within your, to maybe take some risks or splurge more, but it's definitely harder to stay disciplined and regimented, frugal to a certain extent if that's in your repertoire. So I definitely appreciate you mentioning that, and you've mentioned a few names, a few books that have been beneficial and inspirational for you. Any other recommendations that come to mind? Books, podcasts, best practices? I'm glad you mentioned massages because those are big, and I just reminded myself I need to book my monthly massage. So, what are some other things that you generally like to recommend to help other people live their best
Sure,
life and all
sure.
that?
So all those things we talked about on self-care, in my men's group, those guys get invited to my house. Some of them have flown in from pretty far, including other countries. Last week, I had a guy from Greece from my men's group fly in to meet the guys, some of the guys that live here, and myself, and hang out with me. And we do things like that. What I mentioned earlier about the spa that closed down, that brilliant place that I loved. I've recreated it in my house. I now have a steam room, an infrared sauna, an ice plunge with a chiller that stays very cold, jacuzzi, a pool, a weight room in my garage, including a jujitsu mat, 12 foot by 12 foot. So we do all of these things. Yeah, I like all of that. And as far as books, I've read so many audio that, and because I don't usually hold them in my hand, I forget which is which. They all blend in my brain, but they build our subconscious, I think, over time to make us have better ideas. I love How to Win Friends and Influence People, a classic from Dale Carnegie back from the 1930s, and it's still a top seller. It helps you realize how you need to treat people and reach out a little bit, write them that handwritten note and send it out. I love those type of practices. But books are not about just reading them and going, okay, that was nice. I like to have a challenge or an action that I have to take after every book. So this book, the author says to do this. Okay, let me go do it. Not just sit there and it doesn't have to have a workbook at the end. It's just you go do it. Rhonda Byrne's The Secret. I absolutely love that book and credit it for changing my life and taking me on a different trajectory. Um, Way of thinking positively. I read that book and I took it into action immediately. I started doing the things that it said, and it changed my life. My income from the moment I read it to about 4 years later went up 20 times. My net profit income in my business, 20 times. I think that's a pretty good testimonial for the book The Secret. So those are some one.
That's
I'll give you one last one. Um, I've had the pleasure because I bought a business with his name on it, coincidentally, and it had the domain name. It was well before he was a brand. But Jocko Willink, he's a former Navy SEAL commander, very disciplined guy, has a podcast, a very popular podcast, a lot of New York Times best-selling books, owns a lot of companies, and I got to sell him his name, Jocko.com, but I sold it to him for free. I asked him for $1, but in return, I'd like you to coach me. I'd like to go out and meet with you and work out with you. I'd like a few things like that. There were no costs. So he immediately wrote me and said, it's amazing. Yes. And I've had him as like a coach I could lean on whenever I need. I don't take advantage of it. But he's got a book that is a life changer, and it's called Extreme Ownership. And I recommend
Yep.
the audio version because him and his partner, Leif Babin, who's another amazing person, they have these distinct voices. So hearing their stories of battle and death and the lessons they learn on the flip side. So you don't have to be into war. I was never in the military, but I think it's pretty cool. You hear these battle stories, but then when they finish the story, then they go on to tell you the life lesson that came out of it. And so those are three books I recommend.
Wow. That okay, that one is a good story. I was actually thinking of a way to weave in another phenomenal speaker, author, and an inspirational person in my life, David Goggins.
Yeah,
But Jocko is definitely up there as an equal, if not, close second, or however you want to consider it. That was definitely a story unlike any I've ever heard before, and kudos to you for having the domain and the URL, and the fact that he responded and connected, caught him at the right time, because he has very deservedly so blown up with
yeah,
obviously everything that he's done and been involved in and grown.
yeah.
So that I love hearing stories like this, because once again, framing it within the context of this podcast, starting from literally the boat ride over here. Whoever would have imagined? I would venture to say your parents wouldn't have imagined, and people back home in Cuba wouldn't have imagined
Mhm.
that this would have all been possible. But God bless you making a series of choices. um, and I'm glad that you mentioned one that we share a passion for, and one that I'd now like to experience your version of it, with the men's work. And it's something kind of similar to how you mentioned entrepreneurship wasn't previously, so not that it wasn't socially acceptable, it wasn't so mainstream, wasn't so
Yeah.
commonplace as it is now today. I think this men's work, it's still, it's not that it's even taboo, it's just not really, unless you're in certain communities, unless you're in certain conversations, it's not something that necessarily is front and center in most people's lives. But it's had a profound impact on my life over the last year, and change that I've been involved in mine locally. That you heard a little bit of the story when I shared of how my friend and former roommate started it.
Yeah.
But I really think that that's something, men's work, women's work, parents groups, co-ed work. You know,
Hmm.
there's so many groups, there's so many resources, there's so many things out there for people to tap into, and you've hit on some of my favorites, and I hope I get an opportunity to experience your Russian Turkish bath spa
For
home
sure.
version one day, because these things are some of the most important and pivotal parts to my life, and I really appreciate you sharing that. If somebody would like to, before we tell them where they're going to get to hear the full story or more of the story next week at Creative Zen, if somebody would like to connect with you, find out more, potentially look about engaging you in coaching, or all the above, what are some of your best preferred contact
Sure.
methods?
So my website is my name, joelgandara.com. 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 And I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn, Facebook. I actually, believe it or not, I check Instagram more regularly. So it's just my name, Joel Gandara. It's got my picture there so you can tell who I am. And yeah, that's the best way to get a hold of me. I check everything. I check all my emails all the time.
And with the life experiences that you've compiled and outlined here, that led to the creation of your book. Would you be open to sharing just a
Sure.
little overview of the book?
Sure. First, I'll tell you, a friend, a very successful friend, owns medical clinics here in South Florida, four big ones. And he told me about a challenge book years ago. And I did it, and it was very good. And I go, oh, I've never done a challenge book. That was pretty cool. Do this today, do this tomorrow. You just do them. And I did it. And then I invited some friends to do it with me. Got like 25 guys together. We formed a WhatsApp group and we did it. And then I started finding that the guys were like, you know what I liked about this? The accountability and the brotherhood we're forming. And there were some holes in the book that they didn't like, and I didn't like either, and the tone of it kind of rough. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to rewrite this book, but I mean, completely different. It's my style, it's my version. So the book, which later turned into a program, which later has turned into something pretty nice, it's called 31 Days to Become a Better Man. And what I share in here, because I've been coaching very highly successful guys, mostly girls too, but it's really who's evolved to me or revolved around me has been guys. So it's what I've learned from these really successful guys and myself, what works in me. It's my stories in here. Some of the guys' stories, keeping complete confidentiality, because some of these guys are absolute top 1% CEOs making a lot of money. They just needed somebody to work through some things with, and we work together short term. So the book is 31 days. You open it up every day and you do about 3 to 5 minutes of reading. It's on Kindle, paperback, hardcover. But you just read 3 minutes to 5 minutes and you say, okay, today you got to work on this. And some guys who are in the program with me, because we have a WhatsApp group, we have a Zoom call once a week to go over everything. Some guys they say, oh, today was really easy. I love that. And then another guy in that same WhatsApp group goes, are you kidding me? That was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. So it proves that we're not just this isn't a blanket program for everybody. It's going to try to find that weak point that you have and see if we can help you work through it. But one thing is to buy a book and just go do it on your own. And another one is to do it with 24 men in this group and get to know each other. And I've seen so far, we're on class 009. We've had 9 of these just in this year, and we're going to do more of them. I've seen bonds get created where someone will fly to Chicago and they put a picture in the group and say, look who I'm having lunch with. And it's one of the guys in the group. I've seen business partnerships start happening and investing in each other's companies, myself included. I've invested in 2 guys' companies from these. And so that's the beauty of it. So what happened is one of the guys said, you can't let this die after 31 days. You got to build a maintenance program. I go, I don't know how to do that. And he showed me. And by the end of the day, it was on the website. We had like 12 people signed up. It's called the Brotherhood. Now we're at 50. It just started a few months ago. And these are guys who finished my program and want to continue to keep being better. And so working on themselves, challenging themselves. We do things like push-ups, and we'll say, hey, whoever wants to put a video of themselves doing push-ups on the WhatsApp group, and the guys will start getting creative. Last week we had guys on a roof of their house doing push-ups. We had guys at a gas station, at a Wawa gas station, doing push-ups and sharing it. And it's very inspiring because then you go, you know what, I'm not alone. Got to do 100 push-ups today as part of the challenge. I'm going to do it. All my brothers in here are doing it. And so that's what we're building.
Absolutely beautiful. And I did receive a copy of the book, which I'm grateful for. And I just got back from some extensive travel and uh, looking forward to diving into it, and taking my own learning lessons from it and applying it to my life as I'm at a kind of pivotal stage trying to continually level up and reach this next level. So I really find this all to be very serendipitous. I am forever grateful that Carrie connected us, encouraged you
Likewise.
to come to Creative Zen, our monthly breakfast lecture series, mini TED Talk, where I shared on the 5-year anniversary. And now, just a few months later, thankfully, you agreed to share next Friday, September the 8th, as part of our monthly breakfast lecture series, mini TED Talk, that we host for free to connect, engage, and inspire our community, not just creatives, but creative community included, where we bring in local, thought provoking, inspiring speakers to share their relatable stories. As it served as an aha moment for me that led me down this path of arts, culture, community building, and creative entrepreneurship. I've felt called now over the last few years to continue paying it back and paying it forward and continuing to host these storytelling events, because you never know who's going to be sitting there in the audience yearning for some inspiration, if they know it or not. So while this was certainly a great summary in a podcast format, I certainly look forward to the full length version of the story. However, you want to tell it, however much you want to share. So the talk is held in the Alvin Sherman Library on the campus of Nova Southeastern University in Davie, Florida, which is in Broward County. The doors open at 8:30. We have opportunity to mix, mingle, network with other community members, NSU's thankfully puts out bites and coffee and some fruit. Um, and then we start the programming at 9 with some introductions. I have my coach, teacher, friend, Chloe Ravel, aka the Gemini Rising, lead us through a brief guided breath work and mindful meditation exercise to help everybody get in a Zen state. And then, we have a speaker share their story with an opportunity for Q&A leading up to just about 10 a.m. Then you're more than welcome to get back on your day. If you need something to tell your boss of why it's okay for you to miss maybe the first half of the morning, I have a list that I post on the Facebook event page that you're gaining insight, inspiration, potentially even connections, and networking, that resources you can bring back to your company or team. Because I know not everybody is comfortable telling their boss that they might need to miss half of the morning one Friday morning a month. So if you have any questions in that regard, you can certainly feel free to reach out to me. I love doing this. I love growing it. And hopefully, we continue doing this and impacting people's lives for many years to come. Um, if you found any of this interesting, by all means, I encourage you to keep subscribing. I have many other interesting guests that I plan to have on here, and I love this storytelling thing. I love, inspiring others, connecting others, sharing resources, best practices. And if you didn't know by now, I just released my first book called Learning to Choose, not just about my, brief story, uh, but more the learning lessons that I've acquired by making a series of choices, mainly stepping outside of my comfort zone that allowed me to unlock my hidden potential. And I'd like to think if I was a regular Johnny 9 to 5 recruiter sitting at a desk, listening to TED Talks, finding out about Gary Vee, and was able to craft this life that I've been able to craft at my young age of 37, I'd like to think anybody could do that. So, by all means, for more information, you log on to learningtochoose.com, and we have some other resources that I think are definitely worth sharing. If you're not able to get to Joel's men's group, if you're not able to get to the men's group that I'm a part of, or if there's no men's group near you, or maybe that doesn't align, that's not something you're called to, we have something. I don't think I got a chance to mention this to you yet, Joel, but we host it's a it's an accountability goal setting mini mastermind group called Axen Club. It's AXEN, Action and Zen. And it's something that we host for free bi-weekly. We just resumed it actually after a 3-year hiatus from the pandemic. But we invite people to bring their goals, dreams, ideas, startups, passion projects, or none of those things to this free group, where the first thing we do is give everybody a notebook and ask them to write down 150 life goals. I want to travel to Europe. I want to exit a company. I want to build a company. I want to meet my best friend and partner and have kids, whatever those goals are. And that's a process and exercise within itself, putting pen to paper, writing them down. But then we have breakout sessions within, after a little intro exercise, we have breakout sessions where we ask the participants to bring the one goal that they're really focused on building to the table, and we give that person a couple minutes to flush it out, and then we help people smart their goals, make them specific, measurable, action oriented, results driven with a time constraint. What can you do in the next 2 weeks between this meeting and the next meeting to take you closer to your goals? And by breaking them down, by having accountability with the meeting, with a Facebook group where we're not shaming anybody for not achieving their goals, but just by being there to support one another for free with no catch, doing it altruistically, community driven because it's the right thing to do. I've seen it impact so many lives, and now thousands of success stories with multiple chapters after the founder, former creative Zen speaker Ivan Dynamo de Jesus started it. So I'm glad to continue co-hosting and supporting and facilitating that with my friend Eden Nolasco at a very cool art space called Art in Oakland Park that another friend Angela Rush owns. So if you found Accent Club interesting, you're more than welcome to join us. It's a free event. If you found Creative Zen interesting, you're more than welcome to join us. That's another free event. This podcast is a free event. I launched a book club about choices, starting with the Learning to Choose book, and maybe Joel's book will probably be second. Just more ways to connect, engage, get inspired, stay motivated, continue doing good in the world, because you never know how a series of choices coming here with very humble beginnings, going to garage sales, buying underwear, flipping them would lead to